The following is for information purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. All opinions and views expressed by the contributors to this podcast are in a personal capacity only. They do not represent the views of Progressive Equity Research or any other organisation mentioned in this podcast.
Welcome to Talking Tech from Progressive with George O'Connor and myself, Ian Robertson, the podcast where we talk about the UK small and mid-cap listed tech market and try and bring some facts and understanding to bear. George, how are you doing? Are you coping with the heat?
Hey there, Ian. Whoa, it's hot. Possibly where it isn't so hot is on the market. So as we both know, as the trading period ends, the guys who have the news first tend to be the guys with a negative rather than a positive story. So this week was really sort of punctuated by Accesso, we had Hostelworld, and we had Northcoders. And then, of course, from Bytes from a couple of weeks ago. So we've had a week marked by negative news. It's been a bit depressing. How about you, Ian?
How about me? Well, I've just been looking across the Atlantic to wonder what's been going on over there, seeing a few interesting things, such as US government contracts. We saw Oracle last week taking a big hit in order to get some revenue with the US government for hosting and software. Now we're talking about Google cutting prices, and everyone's now pointing to, of course, Amazon and Microsoft are going to follow suit. Whether or not there's ever going to be any kind of read across to the UK market as to what might happen there. Any thoughts?
For me, one of the funnies is that we haven't seen more in terms of pricing action. And also, all we have to do is remember only as recently as last year, when the entire industry was pushing prices up. In terms of the UK, we'll both be cognizant of those happy times, 2011, when we had our own UK version of Doge. And that was the ERG, Efficiency Reform Group. The first axe they swung was on pricing. So I'm sort of concerned we haven't seen more of it. One of the results we did have this week was TCS. So it's the biggest in terms of the offshoring companies. It was a rare Q1 lower revenue from them. But on their call, they weren't seeing pricing pressure. In addition, if we look at Accesso, that wasn't a story of pricing pressure. That was simply too few consumers going out and enjoying themselves. Northcoders, that was a story about UK budget responsibility. If you recall, back in April, there was a message then about UK Gov shifting budget responsibility on training out to the regions, and the regions, it seems to have been a surprise for them.
Somewhat unfortunate timing to their results and then their statements only a matter of days later. But yes, the worst has not happened. There is still a customer base there, albeit a fragmented one now.
Absolutely. It's not just for graduates, but pretty much across the board. And that was picked up by Page Group. We had trading news from them as well this week, but very much a rewind from the story that that sector has been giving us over the past 2 years. Candidates slow to move and buyers of people being very slow to make job offers. And again, everyone's saying this is macro related. Although they did say that salary offers to candidates had remained strong. Now, I am tracking UK tech salary rates, and those rates, either for contractors or for full-times, are just drifting away at the moment. So if you're thinking of switching staff, newer people are cheaper. It's just that people don't want to move.
Everything's a little bit gummed up, should we say?
Absolutely. So what's going to unlock it? And when we think about sort of, big drivers in the market that will unlock, you would say, George, well, the obvious one is the tech sector cycle. But sadly, this cycle is about productivity gains, but no employment gains. As the victim in terms of the Gen AI cycle is staff. I referenced TCS. TCS actually put on 6,700 people.
Whereabouts are those 6,700 individuals?
Well, typically they're in India, but one of the highlights of the period from TCS was actually the UK, which had possibly one of the best sequential revenue growth periods in a long time. But for them, it will be an offshore story in terms of where those people are employed. So we've got a very slow jobs market. And in a very slow jobs market, people will look to training, and hence Northcoders has an end market where there is still a value proposition in there. Now, that said, Gen AI is moving so quickly, and one of the casualties there is the entry-level staff who are being replaced by code. And indeed, as we look further forward, people are saying, well, maybe we don't even need programmers. And in fact, well, we're not there yet. And you will say, George, remember that bunch of shysters from a couple of weeks ago who raised 100 million, and then the coding was actually happening in India. So although we're not fully there, that is absolutely the direction of travel in terms of the coding industry. But at the same time, we only need to go back to London Tech Week. Keir Starmer was there promising armies of programmers to be trained up in the UK as a way of addressing productivity and the UK's position in the world of AI. My only concern is that if you talk to Jensen himself, Mr. NVIDIA, who was with the PM, he's more nuanced, saying, people should become teachers and gardeners because he can see AI robots doing the programming in time.
But to what extent is an AI environment coder a different beast to a traditional coder? And that an AI coder is a systems analyst of old, putting things together, constructing paths, or steering it in the right direction. Or does AI go beyond that to make them redundant as well?
So I love what you said when you said putting bits and pieces together, because if we think of sort of agentic AI, that's all about taking a problem, cutting it down to component parts, and then putting them together. Also, if we think of it from a sort of a junior and starting off, you've got the whole testing world. Testing is going to machines as well. If we look at it from a different perspective and say, where is the human in the loop? And the human in the loop is on complexity, managing the AI agents that are running the code, but also managing the workflows. This is how we manage George's savings account, those sorts of processes. And then, of course, we have the other issue. What if there's a problem? The human steps in. And then the other issue is, what if this becomes an issue around judgment? Then the human steps in as well. Although you'd probably argue, Ian, no, don't increase George's credit limit.
That's just machine learning, is it not?
We also had negative news from Hostelworld. Hostelworld are among my favorites.
A little gem, in your view?
A little gem. However, they have been a victim of pricing. And the underlying idea there is that people are going to cheaper locations. Adjusted EBITDA will be down year on year. So that went down like a lead balloon. For me, I'm really keen in terms of what Hostelworld is doing to make itself look more like a social network. The idea is that people travel in order to meet other people. And they've developed a group of social apps in order to really sort of firm up on that proposition. There were some really nice stories coming out about how tech improvements there will improve the underlying unit economics. Now, that said, one of the issues that the market didn't particularly like was the direct marketing as a percent of revenue. Now, that went from 45% up to 51%. They're saying reason for that, cost inflation in the first few months of the year, but it has since moderated. But for that, they are on the naughty step.
It's a fairly high number, over 50%, is it not?
So it is a high number. At the same time, if we look at somebody like Bookings is, I'm going to say last quarter was 37%.
Oh, right. So, yeah.
You're right. 51% is a big number. But for me, the benefit in terms of looking at Hostelworld is that historically it has been so high that bringing it down just unlocks EBITDA. And that for me was the positive. So clearly EBITDA is down. Draw the link, sales and marketing to revenue has gone up. Therein lies the problem. So hopefully that can reverse out.
Part of the game of being an internet-driven business. In your early years, you actually feel you're just working for Google.
As we all are. The only other thing of note was a really nice acquisition from Capgemini, buying a BPO, business process services company called WNS. A nice story there. If we sort of sit back and think in terms of sort of the big drivers in the industry, and we say, well, that's all around Gen AI, and then say, well, what does that do in terms of the underlying business models, in terms of rev rec and cash collection? You can say, well, part of the challenge is headcount predicated business models just get a lot more difficult as agents, robots, Gen AI, take on those roles. But what the industry is trying to do is move to a more outcomes-based model that they've tried in the past and haven't won that. From a buyer perspective, it's, well, why should I pay more for the same service? I'm very happy. And then in addition to that, the tech industry has a pretty poor track record in delivering to price, to the required outcome. But that seems to be one of the areas that they're tackling. Now, the problem is that then shunts RevRec to the right. Revenue comes in later. Simply put, it's not sort of straight line anymore. It's more future point in time. So you're taking the costs up front on that. It pushes out RevRec and it pushes out cash as well for the promise of an increased contract size on the back of it. So that's an area that we need to monitor as well.
You've been cantering through, and I'm trying to remember, have we spoken about Bytes?
En passant. What's your take on Bytes?
Well, there are two sides to it, aren't there? There is the underlying, here's a business that's been growing very rapidly, and surprise, surprise, at some point it was going to slow down, and against the UK economy and to a certain extent technology background, it is slowing, but it's certainly not broken. But the other side is the inevitable question about management for this business, because we've had a questionable history with the founder, chief exec. Oversight, I think is the word, oversight.
Oversight, good word, yes.
Change of management. The business isn't broken, is it? I think at the end of the day, we still got the basic dynamics.
I agree with you. Business isn't broken. I think you're right in the sense that it had gone through a big growth cycle. And now to play their words back to you, they're talking about more normalized growth.
I mean, it's not a complicated business.
That's a great characterization of it. This is where the finance team earns their bonus. When you're in Entrepro, that little shift can absolutely nail you. And in fairness, that was one of the issues that they flagged up, which was basically that the softing side from Microsoft had shunted a little bit. So that's them getting great pricing from the supplier, which then they'll take a cut on as they pass on to the buyer. And then the other side of the Entrepro equation was that they were changing their sales model, moving to specialized customer groups. And that transition was taking longer than expected.
Without wishing to be so cynical about it, that is an inevitable, let's go try and climb up the greasy pole, trying to add a little bit more value. They were always going to try and do this, which, yes, is a positive because they have mini Bytes below them trying to eat their breakfast, which is part of their natural evolution.
Ian, I'm going to shock you. The industry trade group, CRN, Computer Reseller News, they still produce the UK's top 100 VARs list. When you say mini Bytes, there are lots and lots of them. And notwithstanding your comment that it's not difficult to do this in terms of the underlying business, you can get it wrong so easily. I'm still confounded why there are so many companies in this market. But no, the underlying business is not broken. You can see the reasons for the issue, life cycle being one of them, and then internal machinations, changing sales team, and then your supplier, your core supplier, bumps in terms of the softing side. But there was another issue you mentioned in terms of the prior CEO. I was going to say leaving under a cloud, but that would be too much of an insider's pun. And that's more recently, there have been some share sales by the senior team as well. And in fairness for investors, that just irks a little. They all sold well. I haven't, that kind of thing. So there was on the day an outsized move in terms of the share price. There's still a nice macro sitting here in the background. As you know, Microsoft is pulling support for Windows 10. That's sort of in mid-October, and that's going to just prompt a lot of upgrades from people who would rather not upgrade. Ian, how are you getting on with your Windows 11 upgrade?
My Windows 11 solution was, I'll download it and I'll put a couple of more gigs of memory. And it seemed to work.
In that, you have captured what the entire enterprise world is doing, because it's not just a software story, which is what Bytes sells. It's a story about changing the underlying hardware footprint. It's just taking more memory, despite Microsoft promising there would no longer be big changes to operating systems. They've thought, hang on, this is a way of selling stuff, so we'll actually continue with it. I saw some data from ControlUp. They've been doing this ongoing Windows 11 readiness survey, and it's still saying that just about half of the business managed Windows have yet to make the switch. Plenty of time left.
George, we can't end this podcast without a quick mention of NVIDIA and a $4 trillion valuation.
I think you've just done it, Ian.
Enough said.
Brought to you by Progressive Equity.